Marisa Jacobs is my guest, Managing Director at Expat Web. Marisa, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate your time. Hello, Marisa.
Hi, good evening, Aubrey. Good evening.
There you go. Good evening to you. Listen, I really appreciate this initiative. I appreciate the fact that you've agreed to talk to us about the various visa options for people who hold the ZEP permit. Amidst all of the controversy, the pain, I suppose, the fears that exist on all sides, I really appreciate that you guys have come up with a way of trying to assist those that may not know what varieties of visas and permits exist for them. What kind of relationship do you as Expat Web have with the Department of Home Affairs? In other words, I'd like to understand what Expat Web does generally, but what happened in this particular sense? What was the inspiration and the motivation behind what you're doing now?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Aubrey, and thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be able to share some knowledge and to be able to help. I think so. From Expat Web's perspective, we generally are a work visa service provider. So we usually represent large corporates and multinationals who are bringing talent into the country and who need a work visa for that talent. We've been doing it for many, many years. So as it goes, we have, through doing that, built up a very good relationship with the Department of Home Affairs. We have an annual critical skills survey, which allows us to interact with the department on a regular basis and give input into policy and design policy. We've been very fortunate to be part of the NEPLAC processes where the Immigration Act and the regulation get discussed and how that should be changed. I myself sit on NEPLAC. I represent business for South Africa, where we then discuss that. So we've had a very close relationship with the Department of Home Affairs, and especially over the last few years, where they've really started to invite comment and participation from business, labour and community in terms of how the legislation should be impacted, what the changes are on the ground, what the motivation for those changes are. The department has taken a very evidence-based approach in terms of how legislation gets changed. So we have a very cooperative relationship with the Department of Home Affairs, and we stay very close to them in terms of these changes and how we can assist from a practical point of view in terms of those changes. Like, for example, the thing that really pushed us forward in terms of the ZEP item, which you're asking about, is the announcement by the Minister over this last weekend, where he has said there's been so few ZEP holders who have come forward to make an application in one of the mainstream categories. And he has specifically extending an invitation to say, guys, we're extending the concession by a further 6 months to allow for enough time for you to consult, get advice, and please get your applications in so that we can adjudicate those, so that we can move you off of the ZEP exemption permit and move you onto a mainstream visa category. So there's clearly a gap there where people are not understanding what category to apply for and how to go about it. And we're trying to close that gap for guys so that they can proceed with an application.
That has been my sense, and I'm speaking to the minister in the next hour, and he's agreed to sit with me and talk to me for an hour, and I'm going to be inviting many of our ZEP holders to be part of that conversation, because I think that the conversation has become so toxic, right? And very emotive, and there's fear all round. From the South African side, there's fear and concern. From the ZEP side, there's fear and concern. And I think it has a lot to do with the scarcity that we are feeling at the moment in our economy, which is not just a South African phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. And, you know, when that kind of thing arises, everybody's afraid and we all run into our lagers. We all go into our lagers, which is very, very sad. But from where you stand, from where you I mean, as somebody who participates at NEDLAC on behalf of business, very close to this conversation administratively, what is the purpose of all of this in your understanding? Why is it that there is a desire to change from the ZEP regime to introduce other more mainstream sort of visa options? What, from your perspective, Marisa, and I'd also be interested to understand what is corporate South Africa's or business South Africa's thinking as far as this is concerned?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a very interesting question to ask the minister. He will be able to tell you exactly what those reasons are. The reasons that we've seen that have been shared in terms of the public is that it's been a very...
Marisa Jacobs, my guest, Managing Director at Expat Web. I'm not sure what's happening there. We've just lost Marisa. Do you think we should just reconnect with Marisa? I'm not really sure what the reason is for that. I'm asking the question really to try and get to I'm powerfully aware of the emotiveness of this moment. I'm very much aware of it. But I'm also wanting for us to, perhaps for a moment, just to suspend the emotions and try and to understand what are the administrative, the objective forces behind the issue of the ZEP. Yeah. So that whatever opinion we take in the matter, at least there's also the knowledge of some of the objective issues. Because it's easy to simply say, it's South African law. We don't care what you want. Sure. Or, no, we've been here for 20 years. We ought to be. What are the administrative, the objective reasons for something like this, regardless of how we feel? So what I'm asking you to do for now is just engage your brain, just your brain. Marisa Jacobs is back, Managing Director at Expat Web. So Marisa, again, let me just contextualize my question. I'm really wanting to understand the non-emotive reasons behind that, even though I understand that on either side, the issue, whichever way you cut it, there's going to be emotion, there's going to be anger, there's going to be hurt. But from where you stand, and when you speak to your clients, when you speak to business, what are you hearing about the decision by government to cease the ZEP regime?
Yeah. Thank you, Aubrey, and apologies for that. You did speak about load shedding. That's all I can blame for the signal. So, I mean, we've heard from the department that it's extremely administrative to manage the ZEP process, the ZEP permits. So I think that is one of the reasons that have contributed towards that. From a business perspective, so in the past, a ZEP holder would need to travel all the way back to Zimbabwe to be able to apply for a new visa in a different category. They wouldn't be able to change from a ZEP permit to a mainstream permit within South Africa, which created a barrier for guys. Obviously, the embassy in Zimbabwe is one of the busiest South African embassies around the world. It is one of the embassies that take the longest to process visa applications, just from a practical standpoint, based on the volume that they receive. So it's from a business side, there's been some positive feedback to say our guys who now actually do qualify for a work visa that would allow them to progress to permanent residency in South Africa, they can now apply for that visa in South Africa without the need to return to Zimbabwe to get through the embassy process and wait for their visa to be issued. So there's been some positive feedback around it from a mainstream business, corporate, multinational perspective where the feedback's been positive. I think it's going to be it's definitely a question that you should pose to the minister. He will be able to give you all the real reasons on what they've exactly considered to get to this point. But I do think there's positives and negatives. Yeah.
And I'd like to look at some of those with you, if we can, please, Marisa. But
sure.
The one thing that I find quite glaring and important to say is what you've just said now, that under normal circumstances, people would have to go back to Zimbabwe to go and apply for police clearance and also for a visa. And you're saying that the one thing here is that they don't have to do that. It can be done here in South Africa, which is something that's different. It's not okay. And then talk to me about cost, because that issue has come up quite strongly to say just to apply for a visa in South Africa, the cost is prohibitive. Besides all of the other issues around, accessibility and turnaround times and all of those kinds of things, which I sometimes get a bit bothered by because so few people have applied. But what are some of the critical issues that you're hearing, perhaps from ZEP holders, are seen to be the issues that hold people back from applying?
There is definitely a cost factor to it. I do think a lot of people can't afford it, and there's a cost from Home Affairs to apply for a visa, which I think is extremely low if you compare it to the government cost of other countries to apply for visas. So I don't think the Home Affairs cost is very high. There is a cost by VFS, which is the Visa Facilitation Services, that taking all the applications on behalf of the Department of Home Affairs. The fee for that I do think is quite high. They charge the same fee regardless of whether you are a ZEP holder, a study permit person, a CEO of a big multinational. They've got a flat rate for all applicants, which I do think is something that can definitely be raised.
Explain to me, who are they? What is this? Who are they?
So VFS it's a corporate entity. It's a global entity that is used globally throughout the world. They are like the closest thing that I can explain is like a post office. They're like a post office for the Department of Home Affairs. You lodge your application with them. They take in all the paperwork, make sure all the documents are there, and then they pass it on to the Department of Home Affairs to adjudicate the application. Home Affairs sends it back to the VFS, and the VFS gives it through to the applicant.
Why?
So the ultimate visa.
Why is there a need for this middle person organization?
It was implemented about 4 years ago, and the aim of it was to streamline applications, to streamline the process of accept, so that people were not queuing at the Department of Home Affairs offices to take in those applications. So it was in an attempt to streamline applications, and I do think that they've achieved that to a certain extent through the VFS. It does, however, ramp up the cost. You can't get past that. There's a cost element to it, and for guys like ZEP holders that are cost sensitive, the fact that you have to pay Home Affairs and the VFS, it literally doubles your cost.
So the VFS is a global sort of visa regulating body, and this would be found anywhere in the world?
Not really a regulating body. Like I say, it is just a office that takes in the paperwork and hands it over to Home Affairs, and then Home Affairs hands it back to them. They hand it back to the applicant. So they're not even regulating. They are administrative to take in the application, but they're all around the world. So South Africa uses them in many of the countries where there is large volumes of applications, like in Zimbabwe, but also in China, India, the UK, some other African countries, where you would not go directly to the embassy to submit, like you would in Japan. You would go directly to the embassy, but in the UK you would go to the VFS. They take in the application, they send it through to the embassy, and the same is true for many other countries. If you in South Africa want to apply for a visa to go to the UK, you would also go through to a VFS to submit the application. The same is true for India. They have a different body, not VFS, they're called BLS, I think. So there's different organizations who then facilitate that intake of the visa.
So give me the cost, Marisa. How much does it cost for because you said it's a flat rate, right? How much does it cost for somebody who's wanting to immigrate from ZEP to any of the visas that are available? And we'll talk about that. How much does it cost?
So the normal rate is 1,850 rand. My team will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 1,850, and that is the normal cost to submit at the VFS. You can pay an extra fee so if you were, for example, submitting at the corporate center, it would be more expensive, but that wouldn't be relevant for most of the ZEP holders. And you can submit through the premium lounge, where you then get a specific appointment date and time, and you don't have to queue. And that would then be at an extra 500 rand cost. But actually, I think that's the 1,850. So it's 1,350 for normal applicant, and then 1,850 for premium lounge application.
Does this mean that you have to go through the VFS? You can't go directly to Home Affairs?
You have to. You cannot go directly to Home Affairs. You have to do VFS.
And then added to that is the administrative fee that Home Affairs then charges. How much is that?
Correct. So that is between 425 rand and 1,520 rand, depending on your visa category. There is a sliding scale. So if you were, for example, applying for a study visa, it would be 425 rand. But if you were applying for a work visa, it would be 1,520 rand.
Wow. So in total, an average application for a new visa for a ZEP holder is going to be conservatively above 2,000 rand.
Correct.
011-883-0702 is the number to dial. 021-446-0567. Marisa Jacobs is my guest, Managing Director at Expat Web, just disseminating information about what do you do as a ZEP holder to make yourself eligible for any other visa that is available out there for you. Okay, so it's not a cheap process. It's expensive, right? And I imagine that most people who are ZEP holders are going to be cost sensitive for this particular arrangement.
I would imagine so, yes. We've seen that. We've seen that in terms of the inquiries that we receive. There's definitely a cost sensitivity. But there's also a desperateness where there's no way around the cost. They know that there's going to be a cost to it, and a lot of them are going to their employers and asking for assistance to be able to do so.
What from where you sit, Marisa, what is the responsibility, at least of employers, to their ZEP holding employees in this scenario? Is there some responsibility, do you think?
Look, I think that employers in general, my sense has been over the last 12 months as this has unfolded, employers have been extremely supportive of assisting their employees in terms of finding a solution. I don't think there's any problem around employers sort of completely stepping away from it and going, well, this has happened now, I can't employ you anymore. My sense from the market has been that employers are extremely supportive and have been reaching out to ourselves as providers and have been really looking at what kind of solutions can we offer, how can we continue to employ someone who really has contributed to our business, to our family, to whatever it might be in a meaningful way. So I think I don't think there's a problem in terms of the support that employers have been willing to offer. Legally, an employer has a responsibility to ensure that anyone that they employ is legally in the country. So that in a sense of its own creates a legal obligation for any employer to go, if your employee is not going to be on a ZE permit anymore, they need to be on a different permit that allows them to continue to legally work for you. So it does create a responsibility for employers.
Look, and I think it must be said at this point that ZEP holders are not undocumented immigrants. They are actually documented. The ZEP is a government-issued document. So it's very, very important. I think sometimes in the emotions and all of those kinds of things, we forget that the ZEP holder is not an undocumented immigrant. It's somebody who is compliant as far as the law is concerned, and so forth. So it's very, very important for us to say that. The question around responsibility that I'm asking, as far as employers are concerned, is for the paying of the 2,000 rand.
Yep. And I think my experience has been that employers are very willing to pay that 2,000 rand. As they would as a big multinational who is bringing in a technical expert from abroad, or a CEO from abroad, or whatever, the IT specialist. They would always pay for that person's visa application. It is not it's not unusual. In fact, it is the norm for an employer to support the employee in terms of obtaining a legal visa document. It's quite
Should
standard.
that not be part of a mandatory sort of thing that says, look, we shouldn't have the big impediment being cost here? Employers must, even if it's something that the employee pays back over time, but that should be an option that should be, shouldn't that be part of the package here? Because my sense is the 2,000 Rand plus cost to getting another visa is a big part of the non-application and therefore the non-compliance that we're going to see.
Yeah. I think it's an idea to put forward, but I do think it creates an extra barrier. Rather, it's got the negative side of it as well, where an employer goes, well, then if I am obliged to do this, do I then continue to employ you? So it's got two sides to it, which I think must be considered when we think about making something mandatory.
The ZEP permit was always a temporary arrangement, right? I mean, it was always a temporary arrangement in the best of times, if I understand what the Department of Home Affairs says. From where you sit, was there an expectation, a due expectation, an acceptable expectation for it to be turned into something else other than what it is?
I mean, it was issued initially in 2014. It was extended again in 2017. So I do think there was a sort of sense from ZEP holders that it would continue to be extended for an additional period. I do think there was, or that at some point that there would be an opportunity made available to progress from a ZEP permit to a different category of permit, or to permanent residency, or to something more permanent. I do think that expectation existed. Whether that was a realistic expectation, that is a different story. But I do think because the stay was normalized, it is like you highlighted earlier. Those are the immigrants who've legalized their status. They are in the country legally. They are. I think when we start unpacking the 178,000 and start going through submitting applications for each of them, I think you will find that a large majority of them are gainfully employed. It's people who've set up their lives here. They've had children here. They have integrated into society here. Many of them no longer have family back in Zimbabwe. I don't have anywhere to go back to. And I do think that people have set up their lives here, and did have an expectation that they would in some way, shape or form, whether it was by continuous renewal of the ZEP regime or some other form, but they would be able to continue to long-term reside in South Africa.
But to be fair then to the Department of Home Affairs and the government of the Republic of South Africa, isn't this whole new regularization effort precisely to do that? To say, here are a number of visa options for you, given whatever employability category you may belong to, for you to regularize your stay. Isn't that precisely what the South African government is doing? Bearing in mind, Marisa, that it is the government's prerogative as to who and how it allows an immigrant to stay in their country. I mean, isn't that what the Department of Home Affairs is doing?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. They haven't cancelled it and said, guys, we're not renewing it anymore. Everyone please out, go back to Zim. They haven't done that. They've said, guys, we are giving a grace period of 12 months, which has now been extended to 18 months, to say, please, we invite you, please apply for an application in the mainstream category. You can submit that in South Africa. We've made it as easy for you as possible. You don't have to return to Zimbabwe as would normally be the case. And here's the Immigration Act, here's all the categories that are available, and please do apply in one of those categories, and then you are absolutely welcome to stay.
Yeah, because that's been my sense. I mean, I'm aware of the noise, right? I mean, I'm here. I do this show, and I'm aware of the noise, but at no point have I gotten the sense that government is intransigent or insensitive to the realities faced by ZEP holders, except that I do get the sense that the options that are available to ZEP holders may be intimidating, and the noise is also quite intimidating. The prospects of having to go back to a country that you are no longer connected to in many, many ways. I understand all of that, but again, I feel almost defensive for the South African government in that at no point have I gotten the sense that this is a purging exercise. In fact, the extension of a further 6 months again demonstrates to me that there is this extension of the hand to say, please apply. Now, only 6,000 have applied. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what's available, and I think that's where the big problem is. Besides the cost issue, I think that the information that I've been getting from people who are ZEP holders that I've spoken to on air and privately is that the categories and the options that are available are way too limited, and so people are afraid to even try because the options are very limited. What are the options, Marisa?
Okay, good. So let's run through the options. So there's first of all there's family side of things. So are you married to a South African, or are you in a permanent long-term relationship with a South African citizen? Then you can absolutely apply for a visa. It's called a relative visa or accompanying spouse visa, and that is either if you are married or traditionally married, or you are just in a partnership that has lasted for longer than 2 years. All of those would qualify you to be able to apply for a spousal visa or a relative visa to live in the country.
Yeah.
A relative visa can also be if you have a parent or a sibling or a child who is a South African. Not all of those would be relevant for Zimbabwe nationals, but it might be for some. That you can then apply for a relative visa, which allows you to...
How's that possible, to have a child who's South African when you're not?
So you might have been in a relationship with a South African, had a child with a South African, the South African child is born South African, and you've since split up with that partner, but your child is South African.
Right. Okay. So for that, you are qualifying then for a relative visa.
They could qualify for a relative visa, exactly.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
Good. So that is from a family perspective. Then let's move on to study visa. So if you're studying in South Africa at a university, that's part of the National Education Framework, you can apply for a study visa.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And I understand, Marisa, that
Yeah.
these visa options are available to any immigrant at any time. So in other words, this isn't just for ZEP holders. There are millions of immigrants that are in South Africa that would have made use of these various categories. So you don't necessarily, so it's not just something that's exclusively available to ZEP holders. Anybody who wants to regularize themselves according to those categories can do so, yeah?
Absolutely,
All right.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's all the categories in terms of the Immigration Act, regardless of your nationality
Right.
or your current status. These are all available to
Right.
for any foreign national
Yeah.
to apply for to come to South Africa. Good. So let's move on from study visa. Then you've got your work visa category. So there is 3 work visa categories, but only 2 that I believe would be relevant for ZEP holders.
Yep.
The one is a critical skills visa. So if you've got a skill or an occupation per the critical skills list, the latest one was published in August this year, and there's a large variety of occupations on there, from engineering to IT to healthcare to artisan roles to I mean, there's a large variety on there, and I do believe that there are many ZEP holders that are highly educated and have been employed in South Africa for many
Indeed.
years who would absolutely qualify under the
Indeed.
critical skills category. Good. Then you've got, so if you don't qualify under critical skills, there's a general work visa category where you need to be permanently employed in South Africa, and you can proceed to apply for an application under general work visa. There is business visa. If you run and own a business in South Africa, you can apply for business visa category. It would normally mean that you need to invest funds into that business, but you can apply for a waiver to exempt you from that investment into the business. So you don't, and that is widely available. The DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry, would sign off on that. So you can have a business visa if you are a business owner in South Africa. And I do think that would also be relevant for a number of ZEP holders.
Because one of the things that I've been hearing is that it's not just a visa application process, it's also a waiver process. Just talk to me about what that means, Marisa.
Sure. So a waiver would be if there are any of the requirements in terms of any visa category that you cannot meet. There's a requirement on the list that so let's say, for example, under a critical skills visa, you need to present a letter that a membership of a professional body. But under your occupation, there isn't a professional body that's regulated in terms of your industry.
Right.
You would then apply to Home Affairs to say, can you please waive this requirement of a professional body membership application? And you would motivate why it's not relevant to you. And you can do that for any visa category for any of the requirements.
See, because that has been my question to my brethren from Zimbabwe, because it has been said to me that, look, the options are just not enough. And
yes.
But you're saying to me that there is an option to then say, look, I don't have an option available to me, and therefore I'm waiving these options, but I am motivating for my stay or for a particular visa for these reasons. Is that what you're talking about? Spot
on, exactly that. Exactly
right.
that. And I do believe that that's going to be relevant for a number of ZEP holders. So they must reach out and we will point them in the right direction.
I want to speak to Hillary in Pretoria very quickly. Hillary, hi.
Hi, Ops, how are you?
Thank you very much for calling, Hillary. I'm very well, thanks. Go ahead, sir.
Good. I just wanted to get clarity from your guest.
Yes.
If she can just maybe let us know whether the spousal visa or these relatives visas will allow one to work in South Africa, or they are just for the purposes of staying in South Africa.
Very good question. Very, very good question. Marisa, the spousal or family visa, yeah?
So the spousal visa, absolutely. When you submit the spousal visa application, you can request for work authorization on that visa, and then you include your employment contract to show that you've got employment and you want authorization to work. For a relative visa, so that is if you have a parent, a sibling, or child, and your application is on that basis, you cannot get work authorization, unfortunately.
I want you to help me understand the gravitas of the answer to the question I'm going to ask.
Sure.
With all of these visa options that are available, the process that needs to be followed, it remains the prerogative of the South African government to agree or disagree to give a visa, right?
Correct.
And this is not a uniquely South African arrangement. This is international best practice, that whatever visa application I make, and I've had that experience myself,
Yes.
and however much I may believe I am entitled to a particular, it still is the prerogative of that government to issue it or not.
Correct. Absolutely the prerogative of the government, but when they do reject it, they need to give you a reason on
Right.
why they've rejected it. And you then have the opportunity to appeal that decision if you believe that they've come to that conclusion incorrectly. And if they again reject the appeal, you've got a second option to appeal it again to a higher authority to say, I believe you've come to the wrong conclusion,
Yes.
you've interpreted my documentation wrong. So there are many courses of action, and it cannot just be rejected outright for no reason.
Yes.
There needs to be a reason provided. So if you meet all the requirements and you tick all the boxes, there is no reason why an application will be rejected. At least it's not been my experience, unless it's an administrative oversight, in which case you appeal and it then gets issued and they go, sorry, we didn't see that, or we overlooked that.
Is there-
and it then gets issued.
Is there reason to fear that, though, Marisa? I mean, is there any reason to fear that people are simply going to be rejected, nje, without any, accompanying reasons as to why, and also the offering of that appeal process? I'm asking this because I'm a bit confused at this stage as to the low numbers of applications besides the prohibitive cost issue. At this stage, based on what I'm hearing from you, there's no reason to fear?
No, absolutely not. I think it is, and I think that's why your show is so valuable and why unpacking it over such a long period so that we can get to these real meaty questions. I think it's so important. I do think there's a fear factor, but I think it's unnecessary. If your visa application gets rejected, it doesn't mean that you cannot appeal it or you cannot submit again in a different category or any of that. So there's no, I fully agree with you to say that there's no reason to fear that.
And that this is international best practice. This is what happens globally.
Absolutely, absolutely. We do visas for the whole Africa continent as well as some international destinations. So I can tell you that comparatively, South Africa has a very comparative immigration system to many of the worldwide visa regimes. We are no different.
Marisa Jacobs, thank you very much for joining us. How do people get in touch with you? Where are you? Have you got offices throughout the country? How do people get in touch with you, Marisa?
I recommend we set up a mailbox that is ZEP@expatweb.com. So guys can email us. We are manning that box and we will respond to you with good advice on how to proceed. So that's the easiest. But they can visit our website, which is expatweb.com, to find us there. We've got offices in Johannesburg, in Bryanston. We also have offices down in George. But we practically have offices worldwide with the invention of COVID and Zoom and MS Office. So guys can absolutely reach out to us.
Marisa Jacobs, thank you so much for clearing up so much for me. I really, really appreciate it. Much appreciated.